about who I am before we get started. Oops, yes, sorry, forgot to
Very
say
intrusive.
that.
I'm so sorry.
Okay, so I have, as I was saying to Bruce, I do have a background in journalism and teaching, and more recently as an online dialogue facilitator. So I think I'm all about communication somehow in many ways. And I trained with an organization called Solia, and it's US based, but they do have a headquarters in Tunisia. And the idea behind Solia was to create a space for young people, US students and students from the MENA region, so Middle East and North Africa, to talk to each other in the wake of 9/11. And since then, it's grown. Solia trains facilitators, online dialogue facilitators, and they have created packages that they sell into universities, which is based on this intercultural communication and online dialogue. So in a sense, to create empathy, curiosity, and some kind of cultural awareness of each other. So they discuss topics that are important to them. They could be very delicate topics, sensitive topics, and there is disagreement. And so that's welcomed and acknowledged. And there are ways of there's like an 8 or 10 week program in which they talk to each other about different topics. And hopefully by the end of it, they have found some common ground through all the discomfort and all that entails. So right now I work for Untitled, not-for-profit, made up of interested, mainly university lecturers, teachers, admin staff. And we train these people to set up international collaborations, and also provide facilitators to enhance these international collaborations. So it's not really replacing a physical mobility, but sometimes used to prepare students for a physical mobility further down the line. So the emphasis is on an exchange of ideas, not changing ideas. No one's imposing ideas. So we try and create a safe space for these students to talk about these difficult topics. Enough about me. I'm going to hand over to Alice to introduce herself a moment, and then we'll get cracking.
Oh, thanks, Lorenza. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Nice to see. I think I've seen some of your faces before. You might have heard my name before. I'm the training coordinator at ICA, so you might have heard emails from me and things like that, or even seen my face. I'm responsible for the marketing and putting together the in-house and public training program, of which this is part of today for ICA. And interestingly, I also have a background in languages and cultures, and like Lorenza, I'm also all about communication, because now I'm into the facilitation field, but before I actually studied Spanish and French and a whole host of other languages, and I got to do, it was very interesting. I loved studying the culture, and I even got to do a year abroad in Mexico and in France. So it's a topic that's quite close to my heart as well. So that's where I'm coming from. Lorenzo?
So just picking up, yeah, thank you, Alice, for sharing that about your cultural experience in Mexico. So just picking up on that language aspect, often when we do these facilitated sessions, there are people from all different backgrounds using English as second, third, fourth language. And I always say, you know, pat on the back, very brave, coming in here, using a language that isn't your first language. And we welcome all of that. So that's fantastic. It's just worth bearing in mind if there are people in the room who don't have English as a first language, just slow down and let's just be mindful that there may be people who have it as a second, third or fourth language, and that is absolutely fantastic. Okay, Alice, you're going to share the aims.
Yeah, sure. So Lorenzo will be your main facilitator for today, but I'll try and do a little bit of co-facilitation. The aims of the session are really to connect, share and learn about the topic of intercultural facilitation, and how we engage with difference and facilitate people from different backgrounds and different cultures who have different ways of doing things and working, and share ideas on that. And Lorenza's going to lead us through a conversation, and the conversation will be she'll hide it well, but we will be using the top focus conversation method, which is a method taught by ICA. It's the foundational method. It just gives you an experience of that. And at the end of the session, I'll explain a little bit about the top focus conversation a little bit more, and we'll share some further sources and downloads for further support in facilitation. But yeah, I'll hand back over to Lorenza.
Thank you, Alice, for that. Quite a small group. I'd like to invite you, if you can, to turn on your cameras. I would really like it if we could see each other. That would be really, really, really nice. You're going to be working in smaller groups, unless your bandwidth doesn't support it, but it'd be really nice to see. I do like to see people's faces. And to open to start off our dialogue, I'd like to invite you to watch a very short video, which Alice will play for us. It's only 3 minutes. While you're watching it, I'd like you to bear in mind, and Alice will put these questions into the chat. What happened? What did you notice? And what events did you recall? Let's just get the facts. So just sit back and have a little look at the video, and then we will get going with our dialogue. Thank you.
It's easy to put people in boxes. There's us, and there's them. The high earners, and those just getting by. Those we trust, and those we try to avoid. There's the new Danes, and those who've always been here. The people from the countryside, and those who've never seen a cow. The religious, and the self-confident. There are those we share something with, and those we don't share anything with.
Velkommen. Jeg kommer til at stille jer nogle spørgsmål i dag. Nogle af dem kan godt være lidt personlige, men jeg håber, I vil svare ærligt på dem. Hvem herinde i rummet var klassens klovn? Hvem er bonusforældre?
And then suddenly, there's us. We who believe in life after death. We who've seen UFOs. And all of us who love to dance. We who've been bullied. And we who've bullied others. And then there's us, the lucky ones who've had sex this past week. We who are broken-hearted. We who are madly in love. We who feel lonely. We who are bisexual. And we who acknowledge the courage of others. We who have found the meaning of life. And we who have saved lives. And then there's all of us who just love Denmark. So maybe there's more that brings us together than we think. TV2 Denmark. All that we share.
So thanks everyone for watching that. Please, may I ask you, I'm going to open it up to the room. Please take the mic and let's have a look at the question. So what did you notice? And just feel free. The room is yours. What did you hear? What do you recall?
I just think that it really highlighted about the fact that we do have things in common. And, you know, you see people that don't look the same way as each other, but are going through the same things, and that life throws things at everyone, no matter who you are.
Thank you, Ryan, for sharing that and being the first to launch us. Anyone else like to contribute? Please feel free.
I'd just say that I heard, as what Ryan just said, people have shared experiences. I think I noticed the humour that brought people together, almost broke down barriers and allowed them to join. And I suppose the class system the first thing I heard, the class system, that's what the first thing I heard, and labels as well. So yeah, but recognizing that everyone has the same shared experiences.
Thank you, Tanya. So Tanya's highlighted shared experiences, class, humour, I'm hearing from what she took away. Would anyone else like to add anything on the back of Ryan and Tanya?
I think there's like a level of vulnerability, isn't there, in a lot of the people there. You know, like the guy obviously stepped out and was open about his sexuality, but then I think that the other thing that's poignant for me was the bit about bullying, and then being bullied. Like obviously there was a little bit of shame, but also vulnerability and admitting that you've kind of done something wrong, and that's quite special, I think, when people can kind of be humble enough to, in that kind of environment, step forward and admit those things.
Oh, thank you, George, for bringing in the vulnerability you felt. You dropped out a bit, but I'm hearing you talked about the vulnerability and that you took that away, and the bravery of that person who stepped out alone. Anyone else, please feel free to take the mic. The room is yours.
They started by organizing them according to people who, by the outside perception, who seemed to be similar. So they started with the nurses, for example, and then other people who, you know, looked like they made a lot of money, and other people who looked like they were, you know, just the different categories. And then taking that as a starting point and actually having physical boxes on the floor, then, yeah, identifying ways in which people maybe can see beyond that and see similarities beyond the boxes we normally assign.
Oh, thank you, Bruce. I had not noticed that, so thank you. Starting off with the superficial, the appearances. Yeah, I thank you for noticing that.
And Angela's just put in the chat there, how people have many things and many layers to them as people, not just one label.
Yes, thank you, Angela. Would anyone else? Yes.
For me, I think it was the fact that at first, when they went into their boxes, the body language was quite sort of restrained, and then as they found more connections, they physically connected more as well.
Yeah, thank you, Curtis. Thank you.
I was going to say something very similar to Curtis of the body language change between when they are self-identifying labels versus when they had been put into labeled groups. So you saw them, the first ones were, these are the groups you're in, whereas now you're nominating yourself for the groups and labels that you want to be part of.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. All your voices are important in the dialogue, so please feel free to come in if you'd like to say something. I want to give everyone a chance. This is a lovely size group. I'm so happy that we've got this size group, because that's what I'm normally dealing with, and it's wonderful. It's perfect. Anyone else would like to contribute? Okay, so while I'm explaining the next part of the activity, Alice will prepare some breakout rooms. Is everyone familiar with the concept of a breakout room? Please let me know if you're not. You'll just be invited to join a room and you'll get whizzed off somewhere with a smaller group of people for a dialogue with a smaller group of people. Before we go, thinking about your own experience, can you think of a time when you had difficulty communicating with someone from another culture or from another kind of person. And would you like to share a few words about that before we send you off, or would you like, you can use the chat as well. So think about your own experience when you have had difficulty communicating, and if you'd like to share in the group. I'll give you a few moments to think about it. Could be work, family, school, any context.
I think I'd probably say that it's a lack of communication that's normally the difficulty. So not that exchange of speaking and listening or inference and interpretation, but like the fact that there is some blocker for me. So the example that I'm thinking of in my head, there's very much information travels one way, but isn't always received the other way. So the travel and hierarchical flow of information isn't equal. Okay.
Nathan, are you thinking of a professional context?
Yeah, completely professional. Just a hierarchical leader to something that I've witnessed within a team I've had to facilitate before. The information flow, someone very full of ideas, but not willing to listen to others. But there's a cultural difference between the two groups, or between the individuals.
Okay, thank you, Nathan. Yes, Angela, you've raised a hand. Come in, please.
Hi everyone. I was just going to say I used to work as a midwife, so we would often need to communicate with people from lots of different backgrounds, and quite often there'd be struggles there, but you'd kind of find similarities or ways to overcome that, either by like body language or sometimes by touch, or kind of mimicking what you were trying to talk about. And very often people just appreciated that you were trying to make that connection, and that you were making that you were trying to overcome the obstacles that you had.
Lovely, Angela. You also brought in the aspect of non-verbal communication. You're talking about touch, and that's really poignant. Others, yeah.
Drawing on Angela's point, there's a concept for high context and low context cultures, where several cultures rely less on verbal communication and more on non-verbal cues or body language, and so there's higher context outside of verbal communication, and that's something I'm usually conscious of when I'm trying to communicate with people. And low context cultures rely more on the written or the spoken word, where you have to be really explicit. I struggle with communicating sometimes because I come from a very indirect culture, and then when I have to communicate with people where the communication is more direct, I have to make sure that I'm saying what I mean to say.
Can I ask you, Pallavi, you talked about high context and low context culture. Can you explain to us what you mean by that?
So in a high context culture, you would have a lot of extra context in addition to the spoken word. So it would be my body language, how engaged I am. I may say less, but I'm giving you a lot of context in addition to what I'm actually saying. In a low context culture, I would give you less nonverbal cues, but tell you exactly what I meant. And so it's more literal and less subjective.
Interesting.
But in that difference, you may see it as being more curt or more rude or too direct, because you don't know that when I sit like this, I'm ingested, because I could be
interesting
giving you feedback, but being rammed out straight, not giving you as much non-verbally.
Thank you.
I'm conscious you asked for personal experience, and this is slightly more
That's okay. You'll get a chance to talk about that. I'm just
we've got a few comments in the chat as well.
Yeah, I'm just going to read them out. Yeah. So Bruce, thank you for sharing in the chat. I'm going to read what Bruce has said. So he says, first time he had a date with a hearing impaired guy. I knew a little bit of sign language. He was a nice guy, but I found it very frustrating that we couldn't understand each other. Even small talk was hard. Thank you for sharing that. Must have been very, very tough. And Alice is sharing that she read a book called The Culture Map, which explains more about the high and low context concept. It also explains a lot about other aspects of culture too. So thanks, Alice. And Catherine shared, sometimes in profession-based meetings, there can be class or social differences that are difficult to break through. There seem to be assumed preconceptions. Would anyone like to react to anything that they've read in the chat or heard in the room?
I think that what Catherine says about profession-based conversations, because sometimes it is, you know, you've got that difference between people that have been through academia and those who haven't, not, and they're in the same kind of places. However, because the person, I think it just gets lost in translation sometimes. Person who uses words that another person may not understand. And there's this almost sometimes this unsaid fight for brilliance, or that I sometimes feel. I don't know what I'm talking about actually. I just think that I know that sometimes that the social differences can feel like you're constantly being judged. And just because the body that I live in, that I've got a lot of distrust because of my racialized trauma that I've experienced throughout my life. So I think sometimes I can be quite myself, but then I'm always got this sense of distrust of others. And that's also not only from society, it's from my own personal experiences as well. So it just becomes, yeah, it just becomes difficult sometimes.
Thank you, Tanya. I see 2 raised hands. I think Khadija first and then George. Is that okay? Khadija, come in, please.
Yeah, just one example that came to mind was in my previous job, we were doing information sessions about statelessness and where to get help for refugees and asylum seekers that were at risk of statelessness. And statelessness is a very legal concept. There's lots of kind of legal terms and definitions, and we were working with refugees that really didn't have any English, and we're working through a cultural mediator, and we hadn't provided that cultural mediator with any training beforehand. And there's definitely a difference between a trained interpreter and a cultural mediator. They do different jobs. So there was a real, I think it felt like a bit of a information was going one way, but we didn't know if the information was coming out the same as it was going in. So I think that was a real learning in terms of if you're going to make sure you've got effective like interpreting provision and you're talking about something that is maybe a bit complex, to really make sure you've got training and support for the people that are going to be helping you to do that job. Because yeah, the workshop ended up looking completely different to how we'd wanted it to go. So yeah, and it was probably quite frustrating for the refugees that were in the room as well.
Thank you, Khadija, for sharing that important experience. And we'll take one final, George, and then Alice will do the breakout rooms after. So George, let's hear your.
Hopefully you can hear me, but just shout or wave if I cut out. Yeah, just building off what Catherine and Tanya said. I used to work for the Youth Justice Service in Leicester City, and I think there's an innate distrust in professional services from some cohorts, like particularly from young Black boys. And the service I worked in was voluntary, and actually trying to talk to people and convince them that you're there to help them was one of the hardest things to do, even coming from a dual heritage background. And sometimes you manage to sit down and find common ground, but I think the assumption is that you're nothing like me, you don't understand, and you won't. It's very difficult over.
We're losing you there, George, but I think we get the gist. We definitely get the gist, so thank you for that. We're going to put you into breakouts now. Before we go, let me just read out what Curtis said. Britain has an indirect communication culture, and I'm autistic and have a more direct communication style. So it makes professional communication more difficult to navigate. Thank you, Curtis, for sharing that. Thank you very much. You've all actually been pretty brave coming in and sharing, and you've already started digging a bit deeper into the personal experiences. We're going to put you into smaller groups now. Alice, are they groups of 3 or 4, something like that?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
that'll be 3 or 4. So Alice is going to put a question in the chat. You might want to copy and paste it because it won't show up when you go into your breakout room, or you can write it down with pen and paper. But the question is, have you ever been in a situation when you or another person has felt culturally misunderstood? So explain the context. And the next question is, how did it make you feel? So focusing on the emotion. Is everyone all right with those 2 questions? Can everyone see them in the chat? Please let me know if you haven't got them. All okay? Thumbs up, yeah. Okay, we'll give you about 15 minutes. Please make sure, I mean, your groups of 3 or 4, so just time yourselves that you each have enough time to share that experience. And I'd also like you definitely to focus on, after that, how did you feel on the emotion? Any questions? Is everyone okay with that? All right, we'll see you. Thank you, Bruce, for the thumbs up. Anything online, I just use a emoji or whatever. But yeah, thank you very much. If there are no questions, Alice, you can open the rooms. Thank you. 15 minutes or so. See you back in the plenary in 15 minutes.
Great.
Have a nice conversation.
Yeah, have a great conversation, and I'm opening the rooms now.
Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back. I hope you had nice conversations in your breakout rooms.
It just got interesting.
Oh!
Oh no.
Oh, there you go. Oh, that's good. I wanted to thank Ryan for agreeing to be moved at the last minute. We had a little imbalance and we had a 4 and a 2, and he very kindly agreed to be moved. So thank you very much, everyone. We did ask you to focus on emotion. I'm just wondering, would you like to use the chat? And can you put in the chat some of the emotions that came out of you sharing your cultural misunderstanding experiences? Just put something in the chat if you'd like to. So George has used the word humiliated. I know your camera's off, George, because you've got a bit of a bandwidth problem going on, haven't you?
Oh, no,
frustration, guilt, feeling sad, on edge. Oh, wow. Fantastic. Different. Let's scroll up and let's have a look at what people have posted. So I'm seeing humiliated, guilt, frustration, sad, on edge, guilt, fatigue, anger, understanding the anger, embarrassed, irritation. Oh, that's a whole range of, they're quite intense. Well, I suppose emotions are always intense, aren't they? But that's a lot of intense emotion, irritation. In room 1, we had Bharti, Nathan and Tanya. I'm not asking you to go into detail about anything, but is there something, that room, one person, would you like to share just one thing that you stood out for you in your room that you'd like to share with the rest of us? Barty, Nathan, Tanya. You don't have to, I'm inviting you if you'd like to.
Nathan, since you were listening all the while, would you like to brief?
For me, it was interesting because it's not something I'd experienced. So we kind of had that conversation of not having experienced it and then followed it on. And actually, from what I was expecting to be very separate stories, there was a joining of two stories in there. So, and similarities. However, it was quite, for me, the emotion in there was anger, but followed by understanding. Of self, though, not necessarily of the culture, but understanding of self. To be honest, I thought that both Tanya and Barty were very interesting and eloquent in how they expressed it, because it's not something I've experienced. So sitting there, I felt guilty for not having experienced it or being able to understand it, but hopefully empathizing with it. Wonderful. Because I've been frustrated in other places, but not culturally.
Wonderful. Sounds like it was a fruitful dialogue that you had in room 1 anyway, and hopefully you'll be able to take away something from that. Thank you, Nathan, for sharing. In room 2, we had Bruce, Monica and Ryan. Would one of you like to share anything that came out that was interesting for you in your room? Bruce, Monica, Ryan.
Yeah, we talked about the differences of being from different cultural backgrounds, but also other differences in terms of moving from countryside to city, or sexual orientation issues. We had a number of different things. I had the feeling we were also just starting to get going before at the end of the time. I'm surprised it went so quickly.
Oh, thank you, Bruce. Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. Room 3, I'm going to move swiftly on. Catherine, Curtis, Khadija, is there anything you'd like to share with the room that came through? Don't mind who, just take the mic if you want.
I think at first we were sort of struggling to think of examples, but actually we did all have examples in the end. And like Bruce just said, it wasn't just around, what we might first have thought about culturally, but there's different aspects that come into it, and it is kind of a universal experience that there'll be communication issues.
Great. Yes, I like the idea. We all think we haven't had these experiences, but actually, if you think about it, if you dig deep enough, I'm sure you'll find something. So thank you, Curtis, for sharing that. And our final room was 4, Angela, George and Pallavi. Would you like to?
I think one of the things that stood out for me is just that when instances happen, sometimes people just try to kind of brush past it and don't address it, and they think that that's the best way forward, whereas actually acknowledging the issue and trying to overcome it is the best way, because it's actually more insensitive if you just go, oh well, let's move on, and don't really kind of address what's going on.
Yeah, you're talking about the embarrassment of it, and it's just a kind of panic moment before you kind of just think how you can work through it. Yeah, thank you, Angela, for sharing that. It sounds like you had some fruitful conversations and you were just getting stuck in when we brought you all back. So I'm going to keep us in plenary now to talk about my next question is, and Alice, would you paste it in the chat for us? How did these experiences that you've shared shape your understanding of how to move forward in an increasingly intercultural world? How did these experiences shape your understanding of how to move forward in an increasingly intercultural world? The room is yours. Please feel free to take the mic and take the dialogue forward.
I would always just say that, listening to people's experiences it just reaffirms that everyone has different experiences, and sometimes they are the same. And just the openness and the non-judgmental side of, if you don't know, just ask in the best way and don't go on the defensive because you don't understand something, which I see far too often. When people don't understand something, they do get defensive and question it, when actually why question it? It's a different culture. You're not supposed to understand everything, and if you have a genuine question, you can ask it in a nice way that isn't coming across in the wrong manner.
I think, sorry,
I'm just going to say that's lovely, and we've got something in the chat there from Curtis that said, it taught me that I have to do some more self-education to do before being a more inclusive communicator. That's interesting.
Thank you, Curtis. And Angela says patience. Was it Tanya?
Sorry, Tanya.
Was it you?
Yeah. I mean, my philosophy is love. So whilst I need to practice that love in all communication, I understand by understanding my own difficulties and my own kind of history, I can only do it with love. And so because I can only do it with love, I have to always see that I don't have any intentions to harm. And in that case, then I think the words that were being used around patience and having an open mindset is part of loving. So I constantly remind myself, and also because I think if I'm in a good place, then I can be in a good place with anybody else. But if I'm not in a good place, then I may kerfuffle things. So that's my philosophy, is to do things with love. And also that curiosity about other people.
Yes, yes. And you did mention open mindset, which Nathan has put into the chat as well. He said, come to it with interest and open mindset. And Tanya, that echoes what you were saying about curiosity and love. So thank you. Catherine, you've raised a hand. Please come in.
Yeah, a bit similar to some of the comments in the chat. I think just not to accept the kind of majority culture in the situation, even if you may not be part of it, but it might be easier just to kind of go with the flow of like, that's what everybody thinks here. So that's how I'm going to, that will be my kind of starting point for talking to other people and to engaging with other people, even though their culture might be different, their sexuality might be different, whatever it is. I think you have to, it's about being open and not making assumptions that everyone is of one, just sort of one type of whatever.
And we all make assumptions, don't we? I know I'm supposed to come here as a neutral facilitator and everything, but you're constantly combating those assumptions. And sometimes when I do these things with students and we're talking about sexuality or something like that, which is always a very sensitive issue, I sometimes think, oh, so-and-so is going to say this and so-and-so is going to say that. And they never, ever, ever say, they never say that. So I'm constantly having my assumptions challenged as well, and it shakes you up a bit. So yeah, it's true. Yeah, thank you. Anyone else like to come in on the back of what we've been talking about? George, I'm going to read what George has said. There's some good research on creating an environment of psychological safety, and it allows people to make mistakes, learn and better decisions versus psychological danger where people don't engage and avoid. Any other thoughts? Oh, that's had lots of thumbs up. And okay, we have some comments in the chat. Let's acknowledge those. So Curtis says, we talked in our group as well about people self-advocating and being open about their own communication style when joining a group. My experience has been that it's been a process to allow myself to be vulnerable by asking for certain communication methods. Thank you, Curtis. Bruce says, I like what Tanya said. I think we also need to share the love with ourselves where we give others, but also ourselves a break. And Angela shared a link in the chat, which has a YouTube video about psychological safety. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you so much. I have one more question, and Alice will put that in the chat for me. So have you changed or modified how you interact with people from different cultures or backgrounds as a result of these experiences that you've been sharing? We've touched on that a bit, but would anyone like to add whether you have modified or changed how you interact as a result of any of these experiences?
I would just say from my background, I used to work in education, and you know, you learn to code switch to situations and individuals to get the most out of people, and to engage them the most. And I think that's carried on into my role as kind of community engagement, which I do now. Is I can see that I change my behaviour, my attitudes, the way that I speak. When I speak to different people, when I know that I'm kind of meeting them at the level that they're at, so that it's the most productive conversation that we've got. And you know, I think I do recognise it. I still recognise it. As a man, I know that when I go into a garage with my car, my voice goes deep. And I'd maybe chuck in a few mates there, but you know, I think that I picked up on that, and I would say code switching is very important when you are working with different cultures.
Ryan, my voice goes deeper as well when I go into a garage, and I'm a woman.
Oh, I love that. I've seen your hand raised, Curtis. Just a minute. I'm just going to read what. Sorry, that's really funny about the garage. Catherine says she's become a better listener rather than jumping in with my own thoughts before hearing where others are coming from. Yes, active listening, really, it's very helpful if we can practice that, isn't it? And Angela says, acknowledge my own privilege and that I may not understand or have direct experiences of some issues. Yeah, some fantastic tips coming out here. Curtis, you had your hand raised, so let's come back to you.
Yes, so for me, it's been kind of overcoming my own preconceptions. So in the past, where I might have interpreted a colleague's comments based on my own understanding and like not giving them an opportunity because I thought maybe they would be shy about it, I've had to overcome my own discomfort in admitting that I don't know what they're feeling and I'm probably not doing the right thing. So I now try to ask people what they want instead. And it is uncomfortable sometimes saying, actually, I don't know what you mean, and admitting my own ignorance, and just asking the question instead.
That's going back to the word vulnerability we had in our first chat, didn't we? I think, was it Nathan or somebody brought up the word showing the vulnerability in the video, and you touched on that again, Curtis. Thank you. Yeah. And I see Monica has said, observe how others communicate first and start from there. Anything else? Anyone else would like to say something on that topic before we just move on to the next level?
I think for me, there's something really important about neurodiversity, and really, really appreciating how people are feeling or could be feeling or have the potential of feeling. And I think, was it Curtis was it you, Curtis, who said that you have a neurodiversity?
Yeah.
Because I think we can look at people and take for granted that they're in our thought space and world. And I think it's already been said about the way we communicate with people. But for me, anxiety especially in this time we're living in, I think I really have to take on board that there's a lot of anxiety in this world, and maybe sometimes it is about really making people feel comfortable before even speaking. So that's for me anyway, because I'm recognizing how much anxiety is around.
I think it's about what you're saying, Tanya, is also about making space and time for people to settle and to listen and to understand. Thank you for sharing that. So how can you ensure that you remain culturally aware in your future discussions? Alice will post that in chat. Will you ensure that you remain culturally aware in your future discussions? Just a quick round.
I go to different cultural events.
Okay.
So I might go to Pride. I might go to Mela. I might go to, I'll go to any cultural events that's going on, and I'll take part and listen and experience.
Lovely. Thank you, Tanya. Tanya's going to go to different cultural events and see how that feels. Anyone else like to share? Curtis says, continue to ask people rather than assume, read things from people with different backgrounds to me. You can use the chat or take the mic, anyone?
And Brian's put there, challenge your own preconceived ideas. Yeah.
Yes, challenge your assumptions. Yeah. Anything else? Bharti, thank you. I need to hop into, okay, Bharti, thank you.
Thank you. Good to see you.
Good to see you. Thank you for coming. Lovely. Okay, so Alice, shall we do our little Jamboard? I don't know, some of you might have used Jamboard before. If you haven't, we're going to have a little bit of fun with a Jamboard. It's very simple. And Alice has prepared one, which she's going to post the link in the chat, and you can open it in another browser. And the question is, you're going to use little sticky notes, which I think is the fourth icon down. I'm going to open it up. Alice, you explain what we'll do.
Yeah, it's the fourth icon down on the left hand side of the screen. And if you just click the sticky note option, it'll give you lots of different colors that you can use, and just type something in there. And the question is, what is something that you'll take away from this discussion, or something that you can use in your future interactions? And I want you to think, particularly bringing it back to the facilitation world. So if you have to facilitate groups, how would you what are you going to take away from this discussion?
And I want you to invite you to just have fun with the Jamboard and muck around with it. It's quite a useful tool to use online if you're ever doing things. So you can change the color, you can drag over a sticky note. So there's already remain open-minded, and there's an icebreaker activity. We were talking about language earlier on, and I was welcoming people there were some people who don't have English as a first language. And sometimes as an icebreaker, I invite participants to write how you say hello in their language in the chat, and then we try and pronounce it. And of course, it's very funny because not everyone can. So that kind of relaxes people and makes you a little bit vulnerable. It keeps coming out of this discussion. So being patient. Yes, Alice, sorry, come in.
No, it's all right. Khadija says she loves the icebreaker idea. Yeah, I love it too. I've never heard of it before. It's a brilliant idea. Simple but good.
But also some of my students were from Iran or from China or something, and then we can't even read what they're writing. So we need to learn, they're teaching us something, and then we have to pronounce it, and it's really, or a phrase. It doesn't have to be hello, any phrase in their language. And it just breaks the ice and shows that, language, it doesn't really matter as long as you try and communicate.
Yeah, so I've just posted the Jamboard link for anybody who might.
Does everyone have access to the Jamboard? Is anyone having, Bruce, have you opened the link in a different browser? And the icon, the one we're using is the fourth one down, is the sticky note one.
Mm-hmm.
I'm in there now. Yeah.
You're in there. Have a play.
It's the fourth one down, and it's the one that's a square with a little upturned triangle. Keeping language simple so it's more accessible. Yeah.
Yes.
Being conscious of the language that you're using. Yeah.
And I would also say, if it's online, slow down, because the other thing that affects as you've seen today, are connection issues. So you want everyone to be on the same page if you're facilitating online. If there are connection issues, invite people to use the chat more. There's always a way to communicate, and if they do have to turn their camera off because of the bandwidth, then the chat's a good way. So all channels of communication are open. So there's some nice respecting backgrounds, allow people to introduce themselves. Yes, wonderful. Watch the building a psychologically safe environment and learn. Being prepared to pronounce unfamiliar names, love that. Because we say, oh, it's a weird name or it's a funny name. It's not, it's actually unfamiliar. We might not know it, but it's just an unfamiliar thing. So that's a very important point. Thank you for posting that. Healthy curiosity, open-minded. Being more openly about myself to reduce stigma about my minority identities.
Hey, we're gonna have to make a bigger whiteboard at this rate. There's so many ideas.
Really nice ideas.
Brilliant.
Tell everyone something unexpected about yourself or your culture to make difference. Okay. It's lovely. Icebreakers are nice. I mean, they're always like 2 truths and a lie and things like that. I mean, it really does help people to get to know each other. Well done for getting to grips with the Jamboard. Have you all used it before, or is it a new experience? Khadijah's nodding, you've used it before. Catherine's used it before. Yeah, it's quite fun. So there's some takeaways there. I hope you've enjoyed your discussions. I'm sure they could get meatier if you'd had more time in your breakout rooms. That's great. Thank you everyone for all those contributions on the Jamboard. Perhaps Alice, you can include them when you send send them on to the participants just as a reminder. And I'm going to hand over to you now to go through the ICA, the method.
Oh, absolutely. Well, thank you. So we'll definitely send those out to everybody. And yeah, thank you, Lorenza. That was such a beautiful facilitation there. One day I'll be as eloquent and beautiful at facilitation as you.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, so that was we used the top focus conversation method there during that discussion. Has anybody used that method before? Has anybody here taken the group facilitation methods course? Bruce? Yeah. Yeah. Has anybody else taken the group facilitation methods course? Yeah, Catherine and Khadijah. Yeah. All right. So this might not be news to many of you, but for the people it is news to, the method that Lorenza was using, as I say, was the ORID top focus conversation method, which is the foundation method of ICA's top facilitation methodology. And she first of all took us through our senses. So we watched a video. So we watched a video. You might have remembered that she asked us, what did we notice? Asked us to pick out the facts. What did we hear? What did we see? And then she moved on to the reflective level, which is about feelings, and she got us to reflect on our own experiences and particularly how we felt about them. And we had some really lovely comments, like feeling frustrated, feeling guilt, lots of strong emotions there. And then we moved into a more head level. So the interpretive level is okay, what do I do with this? What do I think about it? And we all thought, well, actually, it shows that sometimes we're all the same in some ways, and that we need to remain open-minded. And then as a final level, we moved on to the decisional. So we got you to write your ideas on a Jamboard there of what you'll take away and use in your future interactions. So it moved into action, and some great things came out there, including the icebreakers and allowing people to introduce themselves, creating a psychological safety, and those really concrete, useful things that we can take away. And that is the briefest overview of the top conversation method, which is the first. There you go. You've got a little bit more about it there. So I'll send the slides on, as well as the chat and everything we've discussed here. And that is the briefest overview of the top technology of participation methodology. That method is taught in our group facilitation methods course, and we run those roughly every month. If you've not been on one of those and you'd like to join us, we do them online and in person in London generally. In Manchester, we've just held one in Manchester. So do drop me a line if you would like to go on one of those courses. And we also teach the consensus workshop, which is which moves on from the focus conversation to building a consensus with a group. And that uses our whiteboarding tool and or online, or our sticky wall tool, which some of you might have seen, which is a big sheet of ripstop nylon, and we get people to write cards on the wall, and we do a theming process. But if you're interested, I encourage you to look it up on our website, and I will pop some information in the chat now about that. And then we have 3 other methods in the top facilitation suite, which build on the consensus workshop and the focus conversation method, the action planning method, which is used to get groups to build a short-term action plan, sort of for talking 3 months to a year term. And then the strategic planning, which is really for organizations who want to create a plan that everybody owns in the 3 to 5 year term. So yeah, and additional resources. If you are interested in the top focus conversation, you can get this book online off Amazon. It's called The Art of the Focus Conversation Method, and it's a really superb book. And it's got lots of different ways, lots of different examples rather of different conversations that you might have to have in the workplace or in groups, and it's got examples in there, so I recommend that. And yeah, I think it just leaves me to close now. I'll pop our details in the chat, so if anybody's interested in our courses, let me know. We've got one running in, I think the next one's running in July, the group facilitation methods course online. And if you've already taken that course and you want to move on to the more advanced top methods, we've got a strategic planning course online coming up in June, on the 19th of June. So I'll pop a link to that in the chat here, and I'm going to hand back over to Lorenza and just say thank you. And if you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, please do. I'll pop my details in there, as well as Lorenza's details. Lorenza, is there anything that you'd like to add?
Yeah, I just want to thank everyone. I really enjoyed that, and thank you for coming and just getting stuck in. I really enjoyed it. I hope you did too, and hope to see you again, and enjoy the rest of this sunny day, and thank you for coming.
Yeah, thank you all. And also, if you could, I just ask that everybody fills in we've got a quick evaluation link. It would be great to get your feedback on the session, and because we're constantly improving. So any feedback that you want to give us, we'd be most grateful. And I've just popped a link in the chat there.
Yeah, thank you all for sharing and being so willing to share. Some of these things are very sensitive. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been a great.
Been lovely. I'm going to use one of these emojis. Thank you.
Yeah. And I'm
so lovely to see you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.